Good morning, dear doctors. Let us all welcome the Master of Ceremonies, the PSAAI Secretary, Dr. Francis Tan.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us in this discussion on COVID-19, allergies and vaccines, understanding the facts and the myths. We hope that by the end of this session, all of your lingering questions will be cleared up, as well as all of the misconceptions. Just a few reminders for everyone participating. For those of you who are in the Zoom room, we will have an open forum later, so you can type in your questions in the chat box, and we will direct them to our expert panel. Or you may also use the raise hand function should you want to ask your questions live or verbally and direct them to our expert panel. For those of you who are on FB Live, you may also type in your questions in the comment section of FB. And now, to formally start our program, I'd like to call on the board member of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, Dr. Mary Ann Castor, to lead us in prayer. After the invocation, we will be having the Philippine National Anthem and the PSAAI hymn.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we gather together, we praise you for this day and your purpose for it. You are our refuge and our fortress, our God in whom we trust. Thank you that despite the physical distancing, we can still connect virtually. We thank you and we dedicate this press briefing to you. Father, as we discuss matters that concern the health of your people, we seek your clarity and your peace. We pray for guidance and wisdom for our speakers. We also pray for protection and wisdom for all our medical frontliners. Teach us to be your faithful people in this time of global crisis. We intercede for all those who are sick. You are our healer and our great physician. Continue to protect us and our families from the virus that's causing this pandemic. Lord, bless this meeting today. Bless us and each one in the audience, that we may be a blessing to others. We pray this in the most precious name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Alam ng puso sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang binirang, kuya ka ng magiting. Sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil. Sa nagatak tutok sa simoy at sa langit mo babaw. Ay hinagap tuda, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng atawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitingin. Pagituwin at araw niya kailan ang may magtitingin. Lumanang araw ng warhabit pagsingka, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pagkay pag-aakit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. PSAAI, united you and I, we're building this strong family. Reaching out to the world, we give our very best to care for and serve humanity. PSAAI, together you and I, we'll keep on going till we reach our goals. Excellence with humility, service with integrity. PSAAI, PSAAI. we'll control allergies. Being stewards of the earth, we'll do our very best to care for this planet we call home. PSAAI, together you and I, we dedicate all healing up above. Excellence with humility, service with integrity, PSAAI. Excellence with humility, service for God's glory,
And now, to give his welcome remarks, the President of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, please give a warm virtual welcome for Dr. Romel Criseño Lobo.
Thank you, Francis. Good morning and good day to everyone. Let me first acknowledge the presence of Professor Ruby Pawankar, APAACI President, Professor Stan Fineman, the rock star of the allergy world in Atlanta, an advisor of the APAACI, PSAAI past presidents, fellow allergists, ladies and gentlemen of the press. And also may I acknowledge and thank our pharmaceutical sponsors for today. It has been exactly 2 months and 2 days when our society launched our first position statement on COVID-19 vaccines and its adverse events last February. In the time that had passed, new knowledge had been gained from the global implementation of the vaccine rollout. As promised, we are now presenting updates of our position statements. Today, APAACI and PSAAI will meet with the press in order to provide a better understanding of the facts about the vaccines, safe implementations, and steps to take care to answer our concerns. And we believe that you, the media personalities, will serve as the voice to improve public awareness of the benefits and safety of vaccines. Vaccination is clearly the way out of this pandemic that has changed the lives of people. Let us join hands and collaborate to fight COVID-19. Remember, vaccination saves lives, and a blessed and fruitful day ahead. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Francis Tan.
Thank you, Dr. Lobo. And now, to introduce our excellent panel of experts, and she will also be our moderator for the open forum, a past president of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. Please welcome Dr. Maria Carmela Casala.
Thank you. Thank you, Frances, for that introduction. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to this PSAAI webinar and press conference on COVID-19 vaccines. So this is in conjunction with the Asia Pacific Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology for the World Allergy Week. Now, it's my pleasure and honor to actually be here and introduce our distinguished speakers for this morning's session. And to start off, we have a very dear friend from down under Davao. She's a fellow of both the Philippine College of Physicians and the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. She's right now the part of the member of the Board of Trustees, the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. And she's the chair of the COVID-19 Vaccine Adverse Reaction Task Force, and she was the chair of the Drug Allergy Council of PSAAI. She's still serving as that chair. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to call in a dear friend, Dr. Maria Carmen De Sena. Maricar?
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Casala. Good morning, Professor Pawankar. Good evening, Dr. Fineman. Good morning, everybody that's here today. So I will briefly discuss the recent updates on the position statements of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology on the COVID-19 vaccines recommendation, particularly in people with allergies or allergic diseases. These recommendations were developed by the task force of PSAAI, and I would like to acknowledge their presence here this morning because it is my privilege to work with this brilliant and hardworking group of allergists. Presently, in our country, we have 4 COVID-19 vaccines that have emergency use authority. However, only 2 of these are presently used in our country. CoronaVac is an inactivated virus, and these are the excipients, particularly the aluminum hydroxide, which is the adjuvant of CoronaVac. And most of the adverse reactions noted during clinical trials are more of side effects, from mild to moderate side effects. And there were no recorded anaphylaxis during the clinical trials. However, in the real world, we noted a few patients with anaphylaxis. However, the true incidence will still be confirmed by the National Adverse Events Following Immunization Committee of the Department of Health. Another vaccine that was rolled out recently was of AstraZeneca. And again, most of these adverse reactions were more of side effects during the clinical trials, but we also noted some anaphylaxis in the real world. And the other 2 who were granted emergency use authority in our country were Pfizer and Sputnik. However, we haven't started vaccinating with these vaccines yet. There are 3 main position statements with regards to the COVID-19 vaccines and their adverse reactions. Statement 1, adverse reactions to vaccines may occur and can range from side effects or reactogenic reactions to allergic reactions, and they are not the same. And statement 2 says that these side effects are managed with supportive care. Mild allergic reactions can be treated with antihistamines. However, anaphylaxis should be recognized and managed promptly with epinephrine. Statement 3, the only current contraindication to COVID-19 vaccination is a severe immediate allergic reaction, such as anaphylaxis to a previous dose of the COVID-19 vaccine and any of its components. Again, reactogenic reaction is the same as an allergic reaction. Reactogenic reaction is a side effect, which just tells that our body is responding to the vaccine, while an allergy is a form of hypersensitivity reaction, which is an exaggerated immune response to a usually harmless substance. And examples of reactogenic or side effects are pain and swelling at the injection site, rash on the injection site, fever, chills, body aches, muscle pain, headache, tiredness, and maybe vomiting. Allergic reactions can be anaphylaxis or hives, swelling on the face and the lip, except for swelling of the throat, which is part of the anaphylaxis, itchy skin, difficulty breathing, and other types of hypersensitivity reactions that involves the other organ systems. The PSAAI Anaphylaxis Working Group, headed by Dr. Julie De Leon, developed a very good algorithm in the diagnosis management of anaphylaxis, and they made it into a poster and shared with the Department of Health and to all vaccination centers. And you can download this poster from our website, psaai.org. And again, anaphylaxis may happen, although rare, and it's usually managed with epinephrine. Now, these are the recommendations. One of the revisions that we did was to separate the recommendations prior to receiving the first and second doses of the COVID-19 vaccines. So those who can receive the first dose without the need for evaluation by a physician are those with non-anaphylactic allergy to food, inhalant allergens, environmental allergens, insects, oral medications, and those with delayed reactions, whether local or systemic, to other vaccines, those with primary or secondary immune deficiencies and autoimmune diseases, provided that they're well enough to receive the vaccine and they were well explained on the benefit and the risk and the safety of these vaccines. And those patients with well-controlled asthma, allergic rhinitis, well-controlled chronic urticaria, and atopic dermatitis. Those who need an evaluation by a qualified specialist before receiving the first dose are those patients with immediate allergic reactions within 6 hours, such as urticaria, angioedema, or swelling or hives, difficulty of breathing, wheezing, regardless of severity, or those who had anaphylaxis to any other vaccine, and those patients who had anaphylaxis to oral medications and to other allergens as well. And those patients with uncontrolled asthma should be referred to their attending physician for further evaluation and adequate attack control of attacks. And those patients with mast cell disorder as well. Those who should not receive the first dose are those patients with a history of known and proven immediate allergic reaction of any severity or anaphylaxis on the excipients of the COVID-19 vaccine, such as polyethylene glycol or PEG, polysorbate, and aluminum hydroxide. So since we have AstraZeneca has polysorbate, and Coronavac by Sinovac has aluminum hydroxide. These patients may be referred to an allergist for further evaluation. Then we also have recommendations for the second dose of COVID-19 vaccine. So those who can receive the second dose are those patients who had local reactions after the first dose, those patients who had systemic side effects, and those who only had immunization stress-related response, such as vasovagal reactions. Once cleared, this patient should be observed for 30 minutes after vaccination. Those patients who really need an evaluation by a qualified specialist, maybe an allergist or not, are those patients who had an immediate moderate non-anaphylaxis or anaphylactic reaction, such as generalized hives, angioedema, throat clearing, itchy throat, and nasal symptoms after the first dose. And those patients had immediate mild reaction that's non-life-threatening, non-anaphylaxis and not life-threatening, such as flushing without urticaria or itch, tingling or itching without urticaria, non-generalized rashes, and other non-specific symptoms after the first dose. And those who experience late reactions, such as rashes and involvement of other organ systems. The decision to give the second dose should be individualized, and it should be a shared decision between the physician and the patient regarding benefits and risks of receiving the second dose. And all of these patients should be observed for at least 30 minutes after vaccination in a setting fully equipped with tools to manage anaphylaxis. Those who should not receive the second dose are those patients who experience severe immediate allergic reaction, such as anaphylaxis, after the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. And these patients may be referred to an allergist for further evaluation. And the task force made this very nice poster, the assessment of risk for allergic reaction to the first dose and to the second dose of the vaccine, and assessment before the first dose. We divided the risk into low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. Low risk being all these patients with history of allergic diseases may proceed with vaccination. Those under moderate risk should be referred for further evaluation to their physicians or qualified specialists. And those who had high risk, especially if seen by an allergist, should not receive that particular vaccine that they're most likely be allergic to. And lastly, this very nice poster will tell us who are these people who can proceed with the second dose. Of course, those who had no prior reactions, those with local and systemic side effects, and those with vasovagal reactions may receive the second dose. Those with delayed reactions, those with immediate mild and moderate reactions should be referred to a qualified specialist. And those who had proven anaphylaxis to the first dose should not receive the second dose. And you can download the full paper and all these posters from our website, PSAAI.org. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Maricar, for that very extensive discussion on our updated position statements of the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force. Now we're moving on, and now I'd like to introduce also a very dear friend, and she is actually the president of the Asia Pacific Association of Allergy, Asthma, and Clinical Immunology. And she's the past president of the World Allergy Organization. She's a council member of the Collegium Internationale Allergologum. So there is no truth to the rumor that Dr. Ruby Pawankar is a CIA agent. She's a council member of the CIA. She's a professor of allergy in the Department of Pediatrics at Nippon Medical School in Tokyo. And she's a fellow of so many prestigious allergic organizations. That's the Quad AI, the European, American College, the Japanese Society of Allergy, and the Royal College of Physicians of UK. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one very accomplished lady. And if you're ever thinking of woman power, then this lady is just one very tightly packed package of woman power. So it's my pleasure to introduce and to welcome in Dr. Professor Ruby Pawankar. Ruby?
Thank you very much, Professor Casala. And I thank Professor Lobo and the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Clinical Immunology for actually having this APAACI PSAAI webinar. This is very important to us because PSAAI is a very important organization, member society of APAACI, and traditionally for a long time closely associated with this organization, with past presidents also from this PSAAI. We are actually having this to highlight very much COVID-19, allergies and vaccines, and to clarify the facts and the myths. You've already heard a very nice talk by Professor Maricar, who has explained to you very nicely the excellent guidelines that the PSAAI has created. What I'd like to do in the next 10 to 12 minutes is to just give an overview of COVID-19, especially also in relation to Asia Pacific, and a few highlights on the vaccines that are being rolled out in the region and some of the risk stratification. If you look at this slide, you can see the sequence of events, and I'm sure as press, you all know about this. This is not new to you, but just to say the sequence of events is the first reported case occurred on 30th December 2019. And then, of course, the virus was isolated on 7th of Jan. The genomic sequence of the virus was released on 12th of Jan. Bats were found to be the potential origin, and this was reported on the 21st of Jan. Then on the 23rd of Jan, right when the Chinese New Year had started, was the Wuhan lockdown. On 30th of Jan, this was declared as a global health emergency. And then, of course, on 11th of Feb, the virus was named as SARS COV-2 because it's the same SARS COV series like SARS COV-1, as I will come to later on my slides. And the disease was named COVID-19. On 18th of Feb, they actually reported the ultrastructure of the ACE2 receptor. In simple language, when a virus enters the body, it has to attach itself to a cell. And that's how the infection is initiated. In order to attach itself to a cell, it has to attach itself to the receptor on the surface of the cell. And it is this ACE2 receptor that the SARS CoV-2 actually binds to. And this is the same for SARS CoV-1. So they have a shared receptor. This is the current status of the global situation of this pandemic. Now, unlike SARS CoV-1, which was in 2002, 2003, was more contained and did not affect areas like the United States and Latin America. Whereas, and so also MERS was actually just limited to the Middle East. Whereas SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 is a global pandemic affecting over 200 countries and lasting for such a long time. So look at the number of confirmed cases and look at number of deaths. And this clearly shows that even today, we are still in the acute phase of the disease. So we are very, very much in the face of this disease and need many steps to actually get over this pandemic. This actually just shows the most recent new cases. So on a daily basis, you can see this. It's a few days old, but as you can see very clearly, the number of cases, and this green listing shows India. And as you all know very clearly, India has gone into second surge, and this second surge is even much more than the first surge. And today's report shows that India has even crossed Brazil in the number of new cases, followed by Indonesia and Philippines. And of course, you have the other countries in these other charts, which have less number of cases. Again, if you look at deaths, again, India is peaking, as you can see here, followed by Indonesia, and then of course, Philippines. And then you can see that there's a recent surge also in Japan, but much less. This is part of a survey that all of us, 14 countries, including Philippines, have conducted in the region. And the reason why I'm showing this is also in relation to a disease that's important to us within our specialty, and that's common, non-communicable disease within our community. Now, if you look at the different non-communicable diseases that are comorbidities among the confirmed patients, this is very similar to what you see in the rest of the world. Hypertension, diabetes, cardiac disease, COPD, these are all common comorbidities, and obesity too. But if you look at the number of asthmatics or patients with allergic disease, is very few. And this is very unique because asthma usually is a risk factor for viral infections, and asthmatics are more prone to viral infections. So why is it so? This is an interesting aspect. But this is not limited to our region, and we see the same finding in Europe and the rest of the world. And this is Italy at its first peak, and you see the regions Lombardia, Piemonte, which had the largest number of cases during the first peak. The number of severe asthmatics were very few. And the simple language, I will tell you in the next slides, what really is the reason why asthmatics are not so affected. And again, this is just a hypothesis, and we need further studies to understand that. Now, if you look at this slide, you can see this is the structure of the SARS CoV-2 virus. And why I'm showing this to you is to understand that there are many proteins on the surface of this virus, like the nuclear the envelope, the N protein, the spike protein. Now, of all the different, and all these different proteins have different functions in like downregulating interferon gamma or causing apoptosis and so on. But the most important is the spike protein, because this is the one that's being targeted for the vaccines too. But this spike protein is the one that actually attaches itself to the ACE2 receptor on the surface of the pneumocytes, type 2 pneumocytes, or the cells in the airways. And then from there, it goes into the bloodstream and also reaches the other organs. So you can see very clearly that the spike protein is a crucial protein to be targeted in treatments. Now, when you look at the vaccines, there are so many vaccines. We were talking with the World Health Organization yesterday, and there are more than 200 vaccines actually being developed, and almost 27 of them actually in various phases of clinical trials, 10 of them actually almost reaching approval. But of course, we will, and they are, of course, emergency approval because it's not the usual circumstances that we are in. But what type of vaccines do we have? Vaccines can be RNA-based, they can be protein subunit-based, they can be DNA-based, they can be inactivated virus, they can be viral vectors, they can be live attenuated virus, and so on. So there are a variety of different ways you can develop a vaccine. And even like mRNA vaccines, even though they are new, the mRNA technology for vaccine development is as old as 20 years. Now, these are the current vaccines that we have today for clinical use. We have the CoronaVac, the Sputnik, the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and more recently, the J&J. And if you look at this different category, you can see inactivated virus, and you can see the virus vector in Sputnik and in AstraZeneca, and the Pfizer and also the J&J, and the Pfizer and the Moderna are the ones which are the mRNA vaccines. But just to highlight in this area that most of them have a good efficacy between 50 to 95%, and on an average 75% and more. And that comes within what WHO's recommendations are, is the efficacy should be above. So the cutoff line is 50%. So if it's above 50%, it is acceptable. And on an average, it's 75% and more. When you look at the anaphylaxis, which was actually now addressed in the PSAAI guidelines, you can see that both for Pfizer and Moderna, even though anaphylaxis was reported, it's very, very low percentage of patients who are actually having these anaphylactic reactions. Now, why is this so? All vaccines have side effects. This is known historically, whether it's polio, whether it's measles, all vaccines have, but those vaccines have been studied over years. And by the time they get reported, they come with that reaction that it's not highlighted so much like today. Now we are in a pandemic. So everything, vaccine development, scientists, regulators, pharmaceutical companies, the World Health Organization, clinicians, everyone's working so hard and so rapidly to develop this. So it is quite possible that people feel a sense of hesitancy when they hear these reports. Of course, we have to report it, but what you see here is that it's so low, the incidence of anaphylaxis. And so also when you talk about the AstraZeneca report, there are only like 4 cases in a million of them. So there's so few cases. And of course, when these get reported, the industry and the regulators and the World Health Organization try to risk stratify and see what are the things that we need to do, which segment of the population we need to actually be careful about, and how do we proceed further. So this is being looked at very carefully, even though the proportion of side effects are so low. Now, this is the rollout of the vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines in this region. And as you can see here, we have Pfizer, we have AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, Sinovac, Covaxin, we have Covishield, which is same as AstraZeneca, and we have Moderna. So we have literally most of the vaccines. J&J not as yet, but should be also available in our region in due course. But all these different vaccines have been rolled out. And the interesting part is the speed at which people are getting vaccinated, and this is very important. In some countries, we have already vaccinated healthcare workers, we have vaccinated the elderly, and the people above 45 years and above are actually being vaccinated. In some countries, it's slower. So we just started with the healthcare workers. In some countries, it's still just about to start. But the most important thing is that despite whatever one may talk about these vaccines having immediate reactions, like as I can show you here, and that was talked about. You can have an Ig-mediated reaction that's from minutes to less than 4 hours, or a more T-cell mediated reaction, which occurs later, 48 to 72 hours, or you can have a biphasic reaction. So these are the different symptoms already discussed. I'm not going to go into details of this because it's already been talked about. Now, what are the contraindications based on US CDC, UK MHRA, and APAACI's recommendations? As also talked about by the Philippine guidelines, severe allergic reaction after a first dose or of the vaccine or to a component of the COVID-19 vaccine is a contraindication. An immediate allergic reaction of any severity to a previous dose of or unknown diagnosed allergy to a component of the vaccine. And of course, previous allergic reaction to polyethylene glycol or polysorbate that is often an excipient in the vaccine. So these are the real contraindications. And of course, you need to take precautions in several cases, and this has already been dealt with by Professor Pawankar. And as you can see in patients who have an immediate reaction or people with a contraindication to messenger RNA, COVID-19 vaccines, you need actions like risk assessment, considering referral to an allergist immunologist who is capable of making the necessary investigations. It need be skin test depending on which part of the world you are in and what are the tools you have in hand. And of course, a 30-minute observation and pre-treatment with antihistamine. If needed, it depends according to the national guidelines in your own country and the vaccine that is available in the country. But my final message to all of you, and as already mentioned by Dr. Pawankar, you are, and Dr. Lobo, you are our voice to everyone, to the population, to the community. Please do understand that it's very, very important that the message you take would actually help our community, would actually lead to herd immunity, would actually lead to an end of the pandemic. So vaccines save millions of lives. We've known this with the polio, with the various vaccines we've had over the years. All of them have some side effects, but they have saved millions of lives. Vaccines work by training and preparing the body's natural defenses, the immune system, to recognize and fight off the viruses and bacteria that they target. And if the body is then exposed to the disease after the vaccination, the body is prepared to fight the virus. So let's all get vaccinated. Let's all have vaccination under safe implementation. And that's the way we get rid of this pandemic and go back to our near normal lives face to face. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ruby, for that very informative and very educational dissertation on COVID-19 vaccines. Yes, I would agree that vaccinations truly will save lives, and thank you for pushing for vaccine advocacy, not just here in the Philippines and in Asia Pacific, but globally. Okay, so moving on. Now we're going to call in our third and final speaker before he goes to sleep in the western side of the world. Can I go back to the other slide, please? Dr. Fineman is really a friend whom you can call really a very fine man. He is the past president of American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, and a past board member of the World Allergy Organization. He still stands as on the advisory group of the APAACI, and he's associate professor of the Department of Pediatrics in the Division of Allergy, Emory University School of Medicine. He continues to be the editor-in-chief of Allergy Watch, and he was on the editorial board of Annals of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology, Allergy and Asthma Proceedings. So you can see that Dr. Fineman really had a prestigious career, and he continues to do so in Atlanta, Georgia. So if ever you find yourself in that neighborhood, I'm sure he'd welcome you all. So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Stan Fineman. Good evening, Dr. Stan. May we ask you to unmute? All right.
There we go.
There
Now
we
you can hear me.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah. Loud
Can
and
you see
clear.
the slides?
Yep. What is that? That looks like Manila Bay.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to be in presenter view. You probably are in presenter view, right? Here we
Just
go.
share your
Is that
screen.
better?
Well, no, I can see you now.
Okay. Then. Okay. Well, thank you. Sorry about the technical problem.
All right.
Anyway, thank you all for inviting me. As you say, I do say y'all because I'm from the South, but
It's so cute.
anyway, so we've had some really interesting experiences with the COVID vaccines, and I was asked to give a U.S. perspective focusing on our reactions and what we've done with the reactions. And I think you've had some really good overview of the pandemic. I'm very impressed with what the Philippine Society has done in terms of their recommendations, and I look forward to talking about that a little bit in just a few minutes. And of course, Dr. Pawankar gave a very good, excellent overview of the pandemic and also the development of the different vaccines. So in here in the U.S., when we started rolling out vaccines in December of 20, they started reporting reactions to the Pfizer and the Moderna, which were the two vaccines that we had. And I guess you can probably see that here you can see over 9 million doses of the Pfizer, over 7 million of the Moderna, and you can see the incidence of reactions. This is the reported reactions of anaphylaxis in patients who received the vaccine during that time. And the bottom line was that the estimation was between 11 and a million of the Pfizer and about 7.5 per million in the Moderna. And these research
Dr.
did.
Stan, excuse me.
Yes.
Can we share your screen?
You're not sharing my screen?
Not seeing your slides though. But
Oh
we're seeing your handsome face.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Hold on a minute. I thought I did share the screen. Hold on a minute. Wait a minute. There it is.
There you go.
Can you see the slides now?
Yeah. Can you do it in a slideshow?
I'm trying. Let me see. Okay.
Up there. Put the cursor.
Can you see it now, or is it still in presenter?
It's still not the slideshow. Go up to the orange bar on top, kind of in the middle.
Can you see it now?
I mean, we can see the slides. Oh, it's still on presenter view. There you go.
Is it better now?
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think that, okay, can you see it now? Okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I was basically saying that the first reports of untoward or anaphylactic reactions to the vaccine reported a case rate of about 4.7 in the Pfizer and about 2.5 in the Moderna once they decided to look very carefully at the cases, and they basically decided that these were more likely to be true anaphylaxis versus probably not, or maybe the vasovagal, and it's hard to say because we don't have data on all of them. So the next step was now wait a minute. Now I got to be able to advance the slides. There we go. So the committee that put together a look at reported allergic reactions and looking at an evidence-based approach to these came up with the fact that the polyethylene glycols, the PEG, and the polysorbates were the two common denominators in the vaccines, in both the Pfizer and the Moderna, as y'all said as well. And they come up with these 4 questions to ask patients. The 4 questions were, number 1, you can see here, do you have a history of a serious allergic reaction to injectable medications? Do you have a history, number 2, do you have a history of severe allergic reactions to prior vaccines? And number 3, do you have a history of severe allergic reactions to other allergens? These are very similar to, I believe, what the Philippine Society is recommending as well. And the last, of course, was do you have a history of an immediate severe allergic reaction to the PEG, polyethylene glycol, or the polysorbate, containing in a injectable or a vaccine? So if you answered yes to the PEG, then you're at a very high risk, and they recommend skin testing to the PEG. If you answered yes to one of the first 3, then you're at a medium risk, and the potential there's a potential for a reaction, but it's still hard to say. And they do recommend giving the vaccine with a 30-minute observation. But if you answer no to all the 4 questions, then you're at a low risk, and you should be able to go ahead and get the vaccine. And the current recommendations for people who are not at high risk or at a lower risk is a 15-minute observation. So this is what the publication was in the Journal of Allergy, Immunology and Practice earlier this year. And the history of the polyethylene glycol and polysorbate reaction is really well known. It was reported in 2 cases here in the Journal of Allergy and Immunology and Practice in 2012, in fact, where they report having positive skin tests to in these 2 patients who had severe allergic reactions to the polyethylene glycol. Now, what we've done, and based on the recommendations of these committees, is to use Miralax, which has the PEG, use the Depomedrol injectable, and the Solumedrol as a control. This has the PEG, this does not. And then the Refresh, these eye drops do have polysorbate, and you can make a skin test with that. And we made up a skin test sheet that was a little adapted from the one that was published, but basically we start with epicutaneous or puncture tests with the low concentrations of Miralax. We use the Depomedrol. We use the Solumedrol as a control. And we also use the polysorbate, both in puncture and in intradermal. And you can see how you you go up with the dose, and then eventually you get to an intradermal dose. And this is the protocol we've used in the patients who've presented with a history of anaphylaxis that we suspect have potential for a PEG or a polyethylene glycol or polysorbate reaction. So far, we've done 19 patients in our office. I'm just giving you the highlight of my office. I don't have data for everybody all across the country. Most of the reactions were transient, immediate reactions after the first COVID dose. One of them didn't even have a COVID vaccine, but they had a history of a toothpaste allergy. So they were worried about that and wanted to get tested. And several of them had large local reactions at the injection site. All of the skin tests were negative except for one patient who had an intradermal to the Solumedrol at a 5.5/6, but the Depomedrol with the control was 4/4. So there's some question whether this is clinically significant or not. And in fact, what the physician did in this case was to check antibodies. They had one dose. They decided to check spike proteins, and I don't have the report back on that. But 9 of the patients who were followed up did tolerate their second dose of vaccine. So I don't have follow-up on everybody, but of the 9 I know had their vaccine, did not have a problem, even though they had it. Now, this was a report from New England Journal here in the US as well, looking at patients who had delayed large local reactions to the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. And these were the patients, these were basically 12 patients. They had the large local reactions, usually occurring either in several hours or several days later. And you can see the size of the reactions. This is a beautifully documented study and report. It's really a letter in the New England Journal. But you can see that the patients went on and got their second dose, and several of them did not even have a recurrence of the rash. And in some of them, it was even less severe than the first reaction. So what this is saying basically is that there's a degree of safety with these, because they feel that the delayed reaction was more of a delayed type immune response, not an immediate or an IgE response. It was probably T-cell mediated. And but it was safe to go ahead and give the second dose in these 12 patients that reported. This was just published last week, And this is a report from some doctors in Rochester, New York, where they looked at 2 healthcare workers who had immediate hypersensitivity reactions to their first dose of the Moderna vaccine. They had negative skin tests to the polysorbate, but a positive with the Moderna, but they had one with an intradermal to Moderna vaccine. In other words, they tested negative here, but these doctors are also doing skin tests to the Moderna vaccine. So what they did instead was a graded challenge. Remember, we used to do those for concerns of either medications or for vaccines, where you'd start with a very low dose, and that's what they did. They started with the 0.05 of the diluent, then they went to 0.05 of the full strength, and then they gradually went up to the full, 0.2 of the full strength, plus they got the 0.1, 0.15. So they got the full dose over a hour and a half, period, and they were able to tolerate it well. In fact, here at Emory, at the clinic there, they have given about 60 patients who've had untoward reactions to immediate or they were the first dose. They were worried about the second dose. They gave them graded doses similar to this, not quite as rigorous as this protocol. Basically, they were using 0.1 and then they went up to the 0.3. So it was a little different protocol, but again, it's a graded type administration process, and the patients were able to tolerate it. So it's something to think about. I do want to reiterate what Dr. Pawankar said and what was mentioned earlier, the importance of vaccines. This just shows how many vaccines we've administered in the U.S. We're up to about 3 million average doses per day now. Beginning, the first ones were around late December, but you can see how many have been rolled out here in the U.S. This is the residents that have had at least one shot. I'm in Georgia, and unfortunately, we have probably about 25% of our residents have had one shot, but you can see in some places like New Mexico, over 40%, even South Dakota, and some of the New England states, over 40% have gotten their vaccines there. So it's very reassuring in those states because of such a good high number of patients getting the vaccines. Now, one of the problems though with the vaccine is that people are reluctant to get it. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that. And I know that I saw some of the posters that the Philippine Allergy Society have encouraging people to get the vaccine. This just came out from our children's hospital here in Atlanta, trying to demystify the facts. In other words, showing that fact one, that the vaccine is not going to give you COVID. Fact two, the quick development of the vaccine does not mean it's not safe. That even though it was rapidly, developed, it's still a safe vaccine. Facts three, it can provide protection against more than one strain. In fact, it can. And then fact four, it will not change your DNA. This is a big concern in some of the social media reports. They worry about changing social media. Changing your DNA. The fact five, it does not lead to infertility or miscarriage. Where obviously there are people who are pregnant or getting it now. And fact six, we know exactly what's in the vaccine. It's true, we do know it. It's against the spike proteins. It does not contain microchips. This was another report in the social media. They were worried about microchips so people can, follow up where people are. And so we're trying to, refute these, really errors. I mean, they're not really facts. They're not facts at all. But that's what sometimes people think, and they use this as an excuse not to receive the vaccine. So we're trying to get, more people vaccinated as well.
All right. So thank you very much for your very wonderful educational talk. We all enjoyed that.
Okay.
And now I think we're going to enjoy it more when we're going on our open forum for our question and answer segment. Let me call in also the president of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology, Dr. Romel Lobo, so he can join in the panel. Okay. And maybe call in again Dr. Maricar Ang and Professor Ruby Pawankar to join us, Dr. Stanley Fineman and Dr. Romel Lobo, to join us here for our open forum. Okay, as Dr. Francis instructed earlier on, you could write your questions in the chat box, or if we have time, you can raise your hand and we can entertain your questions. But already there are questions on the chat box that I've been feeded. Okay, so this is going to be a good discussion this morning because obviously people are very interested in COVID-19, the development of vaccines, and how they are really going to be rolled out. Okay, so to start the ball rolling, there's some questions here in the chat box. From Beth Lampas, there's a question here. Is there a possibility that one who is vaccinated for the first dose to catch the virus? And if yes, what is the protocol as far as the second shot is concerned? Anybody want to mention that?
I could take that.
Okay, Professor, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this very important question. Of course, as you know, the doses of the first and the second shot depends on the vaccine. That is number one. Secondly, there are some changes, especially for the AstraZeneca, that the doses, and now also for the Pfizer, it's possible that the time between the first and the second dose can be longer than what is been administered up to now. But most importantly, the fact is the vaccine, and any vaccine, does not prevent you from getting the disease, like influenza. If you take an influenza vaccine, it doesn't say you won't get the disease. Similarly, for the COVID vaccine, it prevents severe disease and it prevents death. So it's basically to protect you from having more severe disease and to protect mortality, but you may get an infection even after the first dose. Now, the timing of the second dose, generally, if it is AstraZeneca, I don't know the protocol in Philippines, and I'm sure our colleagues in Philippines would address that. But in general, like most countries were doing once 4 weeks, but in UK now it's 12 weeks or 8 weeks afterwards. And similarly in India, it's now been extended. So different countries are following different protocols.
Thank you very much for that answer, Professor Ruby. Dr. Amarikar, Dr. Stan, do you have any other thing to add?
No, I totally agree. We try to get them to do both. I think some of the early studies did show there was some immunity afforded by just the one dose, but it certainly gets up to the 90% when you have the two. So it's certainly better to have the two.
Yeah, so there you have it. We really should have a 2-dose regimen for those that are recommended 2-dose regimen. There is only one vaccine that is a 1-dose regimen so far. It's Johnson & Johnson and Janssen. However, that is still not available in the Philippines. It has just recently been given an EUA in the United States, so it may be rolling out soon there. Is it rolling out in Japan, Professor Ruby?
No, in Japan right now, we have just the Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca we're supposed to acquire. I don't know yet about the J&J. But right now it's just the Pfizer, and we started rolling out to healthcare workers just in mid-Feb, and they started on April 12th for the elderly population also.
That's great. So, you know, this COVID-19 really has been one big global health challenge, and this is one pandemic that has really gotten the world together, finding ways to help each other. And the vaccine that is rolling out right now is actually one of those that we see as true solution to our pandemic soon. No? So it's just that we're learning again from each other in different areas of the world because we have different vaccines rolling out. We keep reading about Pfizer and Moderna in Western literature. However, what reached our shores were Sinovac or CoronaVac by Sinovac in China and Oxford AstraZeneca from UK. So yeah, we're all learning right now. And yes, it is quite possible, as the two professors actually reiterated, it is quite possible to have the COVID vaccine, the COVID virus also to still infect you, even if you have at least one injection. For one thing, some reports here in the Philippines of that situation actually was born out of the fact that perhaps they were already incubating even before getting the vaccine, and it takes a while before the disease becomes symptomatic, right? And since we do not have mass testing prior to vaccination, which isn't really cost effective for all the nations, we end up with something like some patients getting the disease after the vaccination. But if ever they do get that, and there is some protection that Professor Ruby has reiterated, and Professor Fineman, it has some immunity, but not yet fully. So we still encourage the second dose for completion. There is another question here from Dr. Lourdes Gasali from Makati Med. Sinovac is the only brand available in the Philippines. They said AstraZeneca will be available again maybe after 2 months. Should we wait or receive Sinovac considering immunosenescence?
Well, if I may, I don't have any experience of Sinovac as such, but as I presented in the slide, it shows a range of 50 to 75 to 90% of efficacy, depending on the severity of disease. So it does show efficacy above what the cutoff limit that the World Health Organization has proposed. So if Sinovac is the only available vaccine in your country at this moment, as everybody says, and especially what the World Health Organization's guidelines are saying, is please take the vaccine, because vaccine is the only way to protect yourself. Again, I reiterate that it may not prevent you from getting an infection, but it will certainly prevent you from severe disease and death. So please, whatever is available in your country, please take it.
Great. Okay, thanks for that reiteration, Professor Ruby. I think part of the problem that puzzles Dr. Guzali here, who is an infectious disease specialist also, is the fact that initially RDOH actually recommended that Sinovac, the Chinese-made vaccine, inactivated vaccine, was the one that was only recommended for 18 to 59 and not for seniors. So some of the seniors who didn't want to sign their waivers out opted for AstraZeneca, and now they're saying that there are no stocks of AstraZeneca right now. But then with AstraZeneca, the interval between vaccines has lengthened to 12 weeks. So I myself, I'm waiting for my second dose come June, and we are hoping, and I think we've been promised that the second dose will be given around that time. Meanwhile, Sinovac has been okayed for patients who are more than 60 years old. So there shouldn't be any problem for those first timers getting the elderly getting the first dose of Sinovac. And also in the meantime, AstraZeneca, this is the Philippine situation, you see. In the meantime, AstraZeneca has been halted for those less than 60. So it works out well as long as we do get the supplies of our vaccines. So abangan. Okay, so let's just wait and see for that. But yeah, anyone else to add to that? Romel?
Yes, Dr. Casala, Professor Casala. When you say immune senescence, it doesn't mean that you will not respond. There's just a delay in the response. So the inactivated vaccine may still stimulate your immune system to produce an immune response. So rather than not being vaccinated and not being protected, I would rather that they be, most especially the seniors, be vaccinated, since it already had been approved for that age group.
Correct. Yeah. That's one thing we hear in the Philippines also. Some of the oldies don't really like to be vaccinated anymore, and their reason is because they're old already. So I don't think that should be a reason. They're even more vulnerable to the severe kind of COVID disease. So we encourage our elderlies and our seniors to to be vaccinated with whatever is available, right? Okay. So yeah, we seniors are not yet over the hill yet. Okay. So question from Ray Pelayo of UNTV Davao. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a COVID-19 survivor who will still get the vaccine? Anyone? So the scenario is the person got COVID-19 and supposedly has antibodies. So what's the advantage or the disadvantage of that person to still get the vaccine? Is it necessary?
You know, I could speak a little bit to that because we have patients who've had COVID, they've had illness, but it's still recommended to get the vaccine. And, you know, we really go by the CDC recommendations, and Dr. Fauci, who is you know, is basically gone on record to say that if you've had active disease, and you should get the vaccine, you should wait a little while before you get it, but then you should still get the vaccine. I think it's basically going to boost your immune response even more. I don't know that people have checked antibodies specifically, but I know a number of patients who've had active COVID, and they've gone on and gotten their vaccines, even 2 doses. So it's definitely recommended here to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, I would endorse what Stan has said. It's very important because also we don't know how long the antibodies will last, and we don't know the antibodies resulting from an infection versus that being from immunization. So I would certainly recommend.
Certainly. Okay. So another question here, anonymous. What is the interval between flu and pneumococcal and COVID-19 vaccine? So they're getting confused already as to when it should be administered, before or after the COVID-19. Do we wait or do we have it now?
What we're doing now with the COVID vaccine patients is we're like for an allergy shot, you know, which you give on a regular basis. We have them, you can get your COVID vaccine the day after you get an allergy shot, because that, you know, if you're going to have a reaction, you're going to have it, you know, within a day. But we ask them to wait several days after they get their COVID vaccine before they get their allergy shot to make sure they don't have any kind of reaction to the vaccine. But I think if the patient is doing fine and it's been 3 or 4 days after they've had their COVID vaccine, then we give our allergy shot. We really haven't gotten into, I mean, we're not in flu season right now, so we really haven't given, you know, that many flu vaccines right now.
That's right. Our flu season is usually during this time we prepare, because our flu season comes in the rainy season, which is June. So usually April and May, we do we're in a different hemisphere, Dr. Stan. So I believe your flu season is October to December, right? So ours is just about now. We're preparing for flu. So there's a lot of people asking if we should get the flu or wait it out or what. You generally, I think a 2-week interval between the COVID-19 vaccine and the flu vaccine would be good. Okay. Here's one from one of our esteemed allergy colleagues, because we were interested in what you mentioned, Dr. Fineman, about the graded challenge. There's a dearth of studies on graded challenge on the vaccines available here in the Philippines. That's Sinovac and AstraZeneca. What would be the disadvantages that will make it impractical to do graded challenge to these 2 vaccines in an effort to establish if patient is really allergic to it or not? That's from Joni. She can probably sing this.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a problem with giving a graded challenge, because you're going to be doing it in the office. You know, if you have a negative PEG, I can't speak for the Sinovacs because I'm not familiar with it. And there's not really PEG or polysorbate in that one. I'm not sure what kind of skin test you could do for that one. But I think a graded challenge is a very safe way to do it. You know, that's the way we do, we used to do flu vaccines that way. We've done other medications that way. And I think you can give your full dose, you know, just over a longer period of time with a lot less risk. And so I think it's a good way to do it when you have a patient who's at risk and you're concerned about potential reaction.
Yeah, I'm still old enough to remember those with egg allergy would actually need a graded
Right.
challenge for MMR.
Right.
So that's already been written out of the books, but I still remember. Even my secretary still remembers those days because it would practically take the whole afternoon to actually let that patient wait every 15 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'd say you'd be also smiling. I think that's about the
because
same
like people have, even in Japan, many clinicians in private practice hesitate to give the influenza vaccine for patients with children with egg allergy. Though it's very clear, our guidelines clearly say that it's safe to give, but those in the private clinics, they hesitate. So they land up in the university hospitals where we give them. And it's not really contraindicated.
Yeah, but so you can just see how we've evolved and how we remember these things. Okay, it's good that we still remember these things. Okay, so from Cher Ram, she relates that I had rashes all over my body in August 2020 due to rabies vaccines. So what should I get? Rabies vaccines. I think anyone? Romel?
Well, I have to, let's first evaluate what kind of rabies vaccine was given, whether it be a human or a duck embryo. So we will be able to answer that question well. And if it's human, we have to identify the component that the patient reacted to. If it's not related to the COVID-19 vaccine, then we may give the COVID-19 vaccine to the patient.
Yep. Anything to add, Maricar, on that?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Rommel, but if it's just rashes and non-anaphylactic, so I guess the risk is not very high. So this patient should be observed though once this patient receives the vaccine.
Well, we'd like to reiterate that if it's low risk, then maybe we can let them go after 15 minutes, right? I mean, no allergy history or whatnot. But for those with allergies and prior problems with anaphylaxis and that we granted them to be given the vaccine, they should at least wait 30 minutes in the post-observation area. Okay, and from Victoria Dumlao, will the COVID vaccine be an annual vaccine like flu vaccine? Because I guess of the immunity status.
We have to say, I think it's very difficult to say. I mean, I think, at least for me, I think it's very difficult to make a recommendation. And I think this question is something I discussed also with the World Health Organization. I think it's very difficult to make that recommendation now until we know how this pandemic evolves, because we are still in the acute phase and with so many different variants also occurring. It's difficult to predict whether it will become. We hope if it is just like a seasonal viral infection like influenza, it's actually something which is controllable and we are out of this pandemic.
We better be out of this pandemic. It's already been taking such a long time. Oh gosh. Okay. And from Belle Surara of Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, can I still get COVID even after getting vaccinated?
I think we just answered that.
We just answered that earlier, no? That it's still possible that you can get COVID-19 disease after being vaccinated, because what the COVID-19 vaccines protect you from is actually more from the severity of the disease. So you can still actually get the disease, you can still get infected, you can still actually transmit it, but to a milder degree, and certainly to protect you from the severe kind of disease that might lead to mortality, that we don't like. Okay.
And
yes,
may I add something? Yeah, just wanted to add something. Also, according to the World Health Organization, they're doing studies actually now to see the transmissibility after vaccination. And some of the early studies showing that the transmissibility is reduced. So that's another big hope. So it's not just the fact that we can prevent severe disease and death, but it's also possible that if the transmissibility is reduced, that's also a way out of this pandemic.
Oh yeah, Professor Sonia mentioned that last night, right? So there is really true hope that the transmissibility, while it may not be perfect, but at least we can see that it will be reduced once we have the vaccine. Okay, and here's one from not Kapay. Maybe the sibling of yes. What's your take on Sinovac, since majority of the Filipinos is getting it? Yeah. Well, our two distinguished speakers are not from countries that give out Sinovac. So perhaps we can ask our president, Dr. Lobo and Dr. Maricar Ang, to comment on that.
Sorry, what was the question again?
What's your take on Sinovac, since majority of the Philippines is receiving it, is getting it?
What's my take? What does
What
this
do
mean?
you think? I guess what she means is, what do you mean? What do you think about that vaccine?
I got my Sinovac 2 doses already. So doesn't that answer your question?
He's alive. And he's COVID-free right now. So that should be good enough. Maricar, were you also shot with Sinovac?
Yes, I'm done with my 2 shots. And Sinovac, the efficacy is more than 50% in healthcare workers and more than that in non-healthcare workers. So it's pretty good and acceptable. And the adverse events, most of them are side effects. So please don't worry much about the allergic reactions. They're pretty rare. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Sinovac was getting some, I guess, bad publicity, but they don't, when people saw the Pfizer and Moderna rates of 94, 95%, they all wanted that. And Sinovac, here comes Sinovac with a 50% grade. So as far as they're concerned, that's failing. But as Professor Ruby reiterated earlier, that's actually the WHO rating of at least more than 50%. So it's still within that recommended target profile for vaccine products. So that should still be all right. And mind you, Sinovac is so far the one, it's an inactivated virus, which is actually part of the old and tested, tried and tested traditional vaccine immunology. So we shouldn't bring it down. So we've been protected by the flu vaccine, which runs on the same technology. Okay, but yes, I will admit the Pfizer, Moderna, and the adenovirus vector vaccines are actually newer and more modern vaccines that have a higher efficacy. But it's not the efficacy that you should look at, it's how you're protected from severity. 100%, it says. Okay, can I still get my second dose after getting infected with COVID-19 after my first dose? Didn't we run already? Okay, so yeah, you can still get it, but just go over your recovery and part, and then you can actually get your second dose already. Can we give inactivated COVID vaccine to pregnant women? Ricard?
Yes. If pregnant women are pregnant women who are in the healthcare workers, they can certainly receive as long as their pregnancy is more than the first trimester, and they should get clearance from the OBGYN doctors.
Okay, there you have it, after the first trimester. Okay, and those who have had COVID, I'm just reading from the chat box, those who have had COVID illness, do they still require a second dose? I think we said that, yes, we have to get a second dose, yes. How can you explain the case of a patient who was COVID positive last December and then vaccinated with AstraZeneca March, tested negative for antibody last April? Oh, okay. So the case, yeah, COVID positive last December 10, vaccinated with AstraZeneca March 15, tested negative for antibody titer last April 10.
Well, I'll take that question, but I think it'll be good for everybody to address that also, May I?
Yeah, sure, Professor, go ahead.
First of all, antibody tests. I mean, there are so many antibody tests in the market. I think very important that we need to use standardized kits actually that will really measure the antibody levels and that you're sure that what you're measuring is really that. Secondly, it's not always that the body responds with an antibody response. It can also be a cell-mediated response, which will help protection. So there could be two different ways in which your body reacts. So just measuring the antibody levels and not finding it is not necessarily a reason why you shouldn't get a second shot of the vaccine. This is what I would recommend. Stan?
I totally agree with that. And it's interesting. I had a very interesting story of a physician who received his 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. And then he had his doctor about a month later draw antibodies to make sure he got a good response. And his antibodies were 0. So the problem when we looked into it was that he had nucleocapsid antibodies done. And the nucleocapsid antibody is what's generated when you have active infection. But when you're given the vaccine, at least the Moderna and the Pfizer, which we have here mostly, it's a spike protein. So it's a vaccine for the spike protein. So it's generating a spike protein antibody. And most of the tests that we do are looking at nucleocapsids. So you got to make sure you're comparing apples and apples, and you want to make sure you get the right test. And I agree with what Dr. Pawankar said. There's a lot of different antibody tests out there, and you got to make sure you get the right one. Mostly the spike protein tests are what's measured for research, and we don't have that widely available for most of our patients here. I don't know about y'all in Philippines or how you measure it.
Well, we don't actually recommend anyway the measurements of antibodies after the vaccinations. Well, the antibodies are the ones that we have actually been pushing for, and we're saying that vaccination creates. But I think it should also be remembered that there are other T lymphocyte cell lines that actually can be protective and cannot be measured by the usual antibody testing. So the simplest is actually, it's not just about the antibodies. So the measurement of the antibodies may not exactly be the right way to find out if you're immune or not. And yeah, as mentioned earlier in the discussions, the immunity, we're still not sure as to how long the immunity lasts, whether it's from natural immunity or from the vaccination. So that's still a work in progress in finding out how long they were. And depending on what we find out on that in the vaccine rollout, that's when we will actually know if we need a booster shot or an annual shot like the influenza shot. So that still remains to be seen. And if you're getting so frustrated because everything still seems to be that remains to be seen, well, you can see that this is something like, at the moment, this is happening. COVID-19 is happening. So we're developing vaccines and we're rolling it out as we actually put them on bigger clinical trials and setting them out on special interest groups. So we will learn some more about this. And the
Okay, I want to just make sure I didn't want to come across by thinking, we're not checking antibodies after we give the vaccines. That is not a routine. I don't recommend it at all. So I totally agree with what you just said. We don't do that and don't recommend it.
May I just add something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and this is also in relation to those who asked. I just wanted to add that, if you get an infection and you're free from it, do you need to be still vaccinated? The other important aspect that I kind of missed highlighting is that when you have a COVID infection, your body's response or the kind of antibody response that your body makes or whatever response, cell-mediated response, is much weaker than when you get a vaccination. When you do get a vaccination, the vaccination produces a more powerful immune response, a much stronger immune response that will be more protective. And although we don't have very clear data of how long the antibodies and this immunity will last, but generally, again, according to the World Health Organization, it is said to be approximately 8 to 10 months.
10 months. So it's it's quite possible that we'll have these shots annually until we flatten this curve really. Okay.
Dr. Bambi, there
Yes,
are two
very
people here who are raising their hands.
Yeah, and it's almost time. Okay. Who are raising their hands? Joanna Yu. Yes, can we call on you, Joanna Yu? Please identify yourself. Are you a doctor or with the press? Can we allow her to speak? Okay. Talking has been permitted. Joanna, you want to ask your question now? Speak or forever be silenced. Okay, well, maybe Joanna's shy. Maybe you can write it down. But you know, I see so many questions here in my Viber and on the Facebook and on the chat box. I don't know where to look, but okay, I just know I'm looking at the clock, and I think we just have 5 minutes, and maybe to wrap up this, just a question on variants. People are so concerned about the variants, the UK variant, the South African variant, the Brazilian variant, and have you heard there's a Philippine variant that started in Cebu? So we are actually worried that our vaccines, many people are worried that the vaccines may not be working, or if they said that that we are protected 100% from these vaccines. Now with the coming of the variants, does that change our stats or our protection? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
May I take this?
Professor B, by all means.
Yeah. So first of all, very clearly, there are many variants actually being reported, but there are three major variants, and that is the UK variant, the South African, and the Brazilian. These are the three major variants. And as of now, all these industry, Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, they're all testing their vaccines against these variants. And what is being seen is that there is a slight level of lower efficacy for these variants, but they still are protective. So I think we should keep that very clear that the vaccines we have now are still protective against the major variants, three variants that we have. Many other variants that we have now are relatively supposed to be minor, but they're still being studied, and they are being sequenced through the different labs across the world. Stan.
Are the variants pushing the upsurge? And I see in your chart it's a global upsurge, not just in the Philippines. We were thinking, why the upsurge?
Well, I can't pinpoint saying that it's just the variants, but it's also that if you see very often like the complacency, and that's what I really like to highlight. Thank you for asking this question, because people start thinking that, you know, with this very, very strict lockdowns, and once they have the vaccine, they want to be off the mask, they want to be off physical distancing, they want to be off having to wash their hands all the time, they want to be off eye shields. So what's really happening is that people are just forgetting the basic preventative or precautionary strategies. And that is what, whether it's Professor Tony Fauci, Dr. Tony Fauci, or whether it's the World Health Organization, or all the regulators and all the health ministries and all of us are saying, please do not let down your guard. I mean, as long as you get the vaccine, you are protected, but you still have to use the guard to protect yourself. And that has to continue till this pandemic is more under control. So that's one of the reasons. The variants could be partly the reason, but also, like, for example, in India, I mean, people have just completely let off the guard.
Okay. Well, maybe before I ask our speakers for their last messages, maybe I can try calling one last question for the raised hands. I'm frustrated with Joanna. What about this Galaxy person? Galaxy Note doesn't have a name. Galaxy Note Ultra. Maybe have your question. You were raising your hand. Talking is permitted. Hello. Maybe she just raised her hand for a while. Okay. Well, anyway, If there are no, I mean, there are so many other questions. I guess that people can just email our prestigious speakers, and maybe we can ask our speakers for their last messages. Let's start with Dr. Fineman.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate. This has been, I learned a lot. I mean, I really did. And, I was able to give the U.S. perspective. And I think that one of the things that I think has been mentioned by several panelists, including Dr. Pawankar for sure, was the fact that I think one of the big problems that we have here in the U.S. is people who are reluctant to get the vaccine. So we've got a lot of push now, a lot of publicity to try to encourage people to get the vaccines. We have some of the Hollywood stars, some of the sports people are participating in that media push to try to get more people to accept the vaccine and go ahead and get it and realize that it's safe, and it's really going to help us all and help us get through this pandemic. So I think if there's one take-home message from me is, please get your vaccine and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stan, on that. And if ever you have excess Pfizer and Moderna and they don't want it, we want it here. Send it over. Right.
I wish I could.
Yeah. Okay, Professor Ruby.
Thank you. Well, I did give my take-home message on my last slide, so it's there. And we will also have this put on the Apache YouTube, so all of you can also see it. We will put it up there. But my last statement is, please get yourself vaccinated. Vaccination is the only way out of this pandemic. The second part, which is equally important, is please continue to use preventative strategies of physical distancing, of as far as is needed, hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene, wearing of mask. These, at least at this stage, we need to continue doing that despite getting vaccinated. Thank you. And I'd really like to thank the PSAAI for joining with Apache in doing this live webinar, for the press, and Professor Stan Fineman for his time and his expertise.
Thank you, Professor Ruby. And yes, of course, we want to thank the Asia Pacific Association of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology. Under your leadership, we have actually been going leaps and bounds. And this is just, this Apache Allergy Week has something else also. So we're very grateful that you actually give us these opportunities to work with you. Okay, how about Dr. Maricar Ang, our esteemed allergist from Davao, from down under Davao.
Thank you, Dr. Casala. Thank you, Professor Ruby Pawankar and Dr. Stan Fineman for gracing us your presence this morning and sharing your expertise with us. My last message is that to all Filipinos, please get your vaccines, whatever is available, please do so. And if you have concerns regarding side effects and allergic reactions, you may ask the help of the 130 plus Filipino allergists, immunologists all over the country. You may visit our website at www.psaai.org, and you can contact us there and download any materials that you may want to use for your references. Thank you. Please receive your vaccines as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Maricar, for that last message, and thank you for all your work and effort under the task force on COVID-19 vaccines. Some time ago you worked so hard for the drug allergy task force, so now it's the COVID-19 vaccine
thank you.
Task force, and we're very grateful for your hard work. So don't forget, we have a trip to somewhere after this. When we're all vaccinated.
Just for us.
Yes, of course. All right. And of course, last but not the least, may I call in our president of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology for his last message for this PressCon webinar.
Before I give my last message, I would just like to emphasize that when we get vaccinated, it's not just the antibody that we are concerned. It also stimulates a cell-mediated immune response. so that even if there are variants, there are non-specific responses to specific viruses, which is through the mediation of our CMI or cell-mediated immunity. So you can still be protected. It's not that epitope specific. That's one. So now, for my parting message, I would like to say, Dr. Ruby Pawankar, Dr. Stan Fineman, it was indeed an honor for you to be in our press brief this morning and this evening for you, Dr. Fineman. And to Dr. Maricar, thank you again for doing this. I would just like to echo their message that the best vaccine at present is the vaccine that you have in your arm, in your body, that will surely protect you as long as it has an EUA, Emergency Use Authorization from the government. It is safe, effective, and it will protect you from severe or moderate COVID. Maybe not mild, but that is more important. There's no death from protection from the vaccination. So again, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to our President, Romel Lobo, for that one last message. And wrapping it up, we actually had a great time in this open forum. We talked about vaccines. We talked about development of vaccines. We talked about how it was rolled out and how there were how the graded challenge, we learned about that. And we also learned about some of the adverse reactions, which actually are very, very rare for the allergic reactions. Most of the reactions are just reactogenic, and they may just be reactions that you expect from any normal immune response from a vaccination. So that just means that your body is working hard. So I think the basic message is actually just go out and be vaccinated. As I always say, ending my own talks on vaccines, vaccine advocacy, walang kaba, magpabakuna. Don't be scared, just have yourself vaccinated. So back to you, Frances, for the rest of the program. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Casala. Once again, thank you to our panel of experts. It was such an engaging discussion. Thank you, Professor Ruby Pawankar, Dr. Stan Fineman, Dr. Maricar Ang, and Dr. Romel Lobo. And of course, our moderator, Dr. Casala. And now, as we wind down to a close, I'd like to call on the Vice President of the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, Dr. Felicia Raquel Tayag, for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Frances. Good day, everyone. PSAAI is so proud to have this collaboration with APAACI in celebration of the World Allergy Week through this press conference. We are truly honored to have distinguished allergists as our panelists, Dr. Stanley Fineman from the United States and Dr. Ruby Pawankar from Japan, and of course our very own Drs. Romel Lobo and Dr. Maricar Ang, and the very excellent moderator, Dr. Bambi Casala. Thank you to all of you for sharing your expertise and imparting to the audience that vaccines are generally safe. It is one way of solving this pandemic, aside of course from the minimum health protocols that we have. PSAAI would also like to thank our pharmaceutical partner, Cathay Drug, especially to Ms. Ann Iloa, Agnes Ramos, Daisy Martinez, and to the rest of the technical team for sponsoring our platform for today and always supporting our activities. Thank you to the members of the press and the rest of the audience who participated in the open forum. We hope we imparted our message well. Let us help increase vaccine confidence and do our share to end this pandemic. Have a good day, everyone, and thank you all for joining us.